start.
Yeah.
Lisa and I would like to welcome Mitchell Kaplan of Books and Books in Florida, an esteemed and a fantastic story about how to start not only one but four or five bookstores. And We had a great conversation on Tuesday. The two of us went on too long. I apologize, Mitchell, for taking up so much of your time, but we seem to be coherent souls. And Lisa, do you want to start though? And see, what you've spent a lot of time with Mitchell, and so you go right ahead and start.
Well, mainly, Mitch, I want to thank you for this and the opportunity. This is a conversation. I'd love to have a conversation that you don't normally have in this space because you have lots of conversations with lots of people. Your book could be titled "How to Be a Book-Selling Superstar" or something like that. Um, but I'd
I
love
think
to.
I think I would call the title of my book "A Legend in My Own Mind."
Okay,
That's
excellent, excellent, and in the minds of many of us. So,
Yeah, and all three of
uh,
us.
yeah. So I think I think we'll start by asking you just to give us an overview because I'm not sure that everyone knows that you all the things that you do. So I'd rather hear your voice about your many bookstore
cool.
endeavors and operations and all the things that you've got going on. So let's just start
Well, I
there.
could give a little history of the bookstore as well if you want.
That would be
So
great.
we've been in business 43 years. We opened in 1982 in Miami. Our initial space was about 500 square feet. It was one room. I'm originally from Miami. I'm actually from Miami Beach. So I moved away after high school to go to University of Colorado in Boulder, where I was an English major, which I think is where I got inspired thinking about joining literary culture. There were some kind of cool little bookstores in Boulder at the time that I used to go to. But then my eyes got open to all the amazing bookstores that were historical, that were the kind of the history of bookstores. And when I was 17 in Boulder, I think I was a freshman or sophomore, I made my way to San Francisco and went to City Lights that I had heard so much about and was inspired by that. Prior to that, in my
Whoops.
Mm. Mitch, you
class
froze.
of a literary movement, with Joyce and Pound and Shakespeare and Company in Paris with Sylvia, leading to the Gotham Book Mart in New York, where I think Ginsberg had a job, as a salesperson there. But they used to fight the fight, against censorship. They were the ones to bring in little magazines. I became enamored with all the stories of what a bookstore could do, but I sort of filed it away. Back in those days, I had no idea. I didn't know retail. I never worked in retail. I didn't know what sales tax meant. I never even thought about that as a possibility of a career until I went to law school for 2 years and I was in a complete state of moral panic and had to take stock of what it was I wanted to do with my life. And I was in DC where there were some amazing bookstores in DC. And I found myself in the bookstores more than the law library. And there was a Saville bookshop. In fact, I think that's where Richard and Lisa Howarth met. They were working in the Saville bookstore in DC. I didn't know them then, obviously. There was also an amazing bookstore cafe that had opened down the street from where I was living in the mid 70s called Kramer Books and Afterwards, which is still there. And I would hang out there a lot. So I then left law school, came back to Miami and taught high school English so that I could um, make a living. And it's when I decided to really do what I wanted to do to get into literary culture. I flirted with maybe getting into publishing, but I always came back to the bookstore idea. And I opened this little small bookstore and told myself that if I could earn what I earned as a teacher, which with a master's degree back in 1980, with a master's degree, I was earning $13,000 a year. So I finally in 82 opened up this little bookshop and I was able to pay myself a couple $100 a week. So I stopped teaching and did the bookstore all at the same time. So that little bookstore, which was little but mighty. I always wanted to do readings and author events. We had open poetry readings. Our first author event there in this little place was with Isaac Singer, the great Nobel Prize winning Yiddish writer, was there. And he became so overwhelmed that, he had to leave. It was just too many people crushed in. And one of the great early memories of my bookselling career is taking about 200 books up to his apartment on Miami Beach and sitting with Isaac Singer, listening to him speak half Yiddish, half English, and sign books and tell stories. It was really, that hooked me just right there. And so now we're talking about 43 years later. So back in those days, in 1982, more than half the books sold in America were sold by indie stores like mine and like all of ours were on this call. And it was very vibrant. There were probably 15, 20 independent bookstores in Miami. It was a very vibrant, interesting world. You met with sales reps. I had an Avon sales rep, for instance. I had a Doubleday sales rep. I had I would meet with sales rep for like 6 weeks. They would be coming through Miami. And it was a very cool time prior to the digital world that we now all live in. So that was my beginning. Where I am now is I've gone through a number of different incarnations, but as of right now, so we own, there are three Books and Bookses in Miami. There's our main store in Coral Gables. We have a store in Coconut Grove, um, which was the quote sort of Haight-Ashbury of Miami back in the day. It's where when I was a kid growing up, it was the only place where you could buy blue jeans was in Coconut Grove. And it's near the bay. It's kind of a cool sort of area, which was on hard times, which is coming back. And then we opened a third store. We have a third store in, in where I think the revolution is going to begin. It's called the Bal Harbor Shops. It's not how many people come into the store, but it's the color of their credit card. It's an independently owned mall, and the owner of the mall, who's no longer alive, but when he was 100 years old, would still be walking the mall. He would introduce me as the guy who brings their dollar per square foot average down. And I'd say, I'd say, you can't keep saying that. You've got to please stop, Stanley. But it's got every major brand in there. And um, for about 30 years, we had a bookstore on what you think of as South Beach. We had that for 30 years. And our South Beach bookshop, um, perfect example of urban growth and then urban decline. South Beach is still pretty cool, but well, it's not so cool. It's just very wealthy. But the businesses, they screwed up in terms of allowing the landowners to just charge outrageous rents to the point right now. It was an outdoor pedestrian mall, very cool. And now it's like any other mall with a roof without a roof. It's got a Gap, it's got a Apple, it's got this, that, and the other, but there are a lot of vacancies. And it's sad because I grew up in Miami Beach, so I was sorry to leave for 30 years. I left during the pandemic when my landlord wouldn't make any deal with them. So that's what I'm doing on the book side. I I I've done a few other things as well. To give you an example, a snapshot of what Books and Books does. We do 400 author events a year, mostly in our main Coral Gables store. Um, Mostly author events, 400 events a year in the store. The larger events we do, we partner with every organization in Miami, both synagogues, churches, the Performing Arts Center, anyone who will have us. We will do our larger events there. And then we'll partner. There's a wonderful congregational church that we partner with. They call themselves a sanctuary for banned books. And they're extremely, progressive. And so we have a really good synergistic um, um, relationship with these guys. Pastor there is amazing. Actually, the pastor there was from St. Louis, Ohio, and she's the one who married Sherrod Brown and Sherrod Brown's wife. They're all very close. So that's what we do now. We do these 400 author events. We started a literary foundation about 2 years ago, the Books and Books Literary Foundation. While we were always in schools, this foundation has allowed us to now bring authors into the schools and give out a book to each kid. Publishers in the past, when they would send an author to Miami for their schools, they wanted to make sure they went to schools where the kids could buy books. But we've adopted about 18 underserved schools. And it's pretty amazing. Yesterday, in fact, I spoke, and the school started today. Yesterday, all the librarians and media specialists had a meeting, and I spoke in front of about 150 of them. And the woman, my contact, who's doing this through the school system, laid out what everything was going on. And the media special, they were given a number or a text or something where they could text if they were interested in it. And I think we got about 100 school requests yesterday. So I told them before I left, I said, I'm going to be in the business of raising money if we're going to continue to do this. It's a really cool program. And we've been in the prisons, but also what this allows us to do is allows us to do all that we've been doing at the same time. Because as we all know who are booksellers, we do a lot of stuff that is basically in the not-for-profit world, right? I mean, anybody looking at what we would do would say, you're crazy, because we all know that prior to having a foundation or prior to doing what we do, we fund it through the sale of books, and that's a hard thing to do. So a lot of us um, are having to find ways to make sure that we continue the incredible programming that we actually have, and the importance that we have in the community itself. Um, I could go on and on. I mean, I just got an email yesterday. One of the things that the foundation is doing as well is making sure that we have the freedom to read. And, we are ground zero along with Texas, probably. It's gotten really bad. The State Board of Education just gave out 45 books. Every school had to, it's no longer where you're going to analyze them. Every school had to get rid of these 45 books. One of them is Judy Blume's Forever, right? I mean, it's absolutely despicable. However, yesterday I just learned that, that Penguin Random House lawsuit that was happening along with Penn and some others, there was a summary judgment yesterday in the state of Florida overturning the original Don't Say Gay law or something. So that, yeah, but it'll go right up to the state Supreme Court. And I'm not too hopeful about that. However, so, a bookseller no longer can do what I thought I was going to do when I started, sit behind the counter and read books, right? And meet people. That's what I thought I was going to be doing. But I guess I realized I had a little too much type A in me. So,
Well, it sounds like you're a lawyer after all, in some ways, in
uh,
terms of being an advocate, you know.
yeah, I mean, there's that advocacy part of it that's kind of cool. Um, so we do
Mitchell,
a
I had
lot.
a question for you. Do you, sorry to interrupt you. Um, I know that you really pride yourself on the elegance of your stores, the style and the look. And Lisa told me before this call that once when she was with you, you were looking at something like 80 chairs for one of your stores or something and trying to pick the right one. Um, how do you combine that with this sort of progressive left-wing culture that you've engendered as well, particularly in Florida? I mean, it's an interesting mix. And I guess what I'm really asking is, what is special character about your stores that draws so many people to them?
I don't think picking the right chair means you can't be progressive, Steve. I think you can do both. Um, well, it's not just that it needs to be an ornate store. I think you and I spoke yesterday about the idea that I look at who's on this Zoom, and I've been in most of your stores, and your stores all work really beautifully. And it doesn't, you just know when a store works. What we did, particularly in our Coral Gables store, every one of our stores looks different from each other. But when we opened our little 500 square foot store, it became very, and we carried, the one thing that I need to say is that our mix is a general bookstore mix, but pretty much like a third to a half in dollars is in art, architecture, design, and photography. So we cater a lot to the arts. And so in the very first little 500 square foot store, we built floor to ceiling bookshelves out of birch veneer. The whole theory behind it was this would be a library of your own if you could afford to build this library and attach it to your house. Very low merchandising. It's basically bookshelves, some face outs, but it was really very beautiful with high ceilings. So when we moved from that location into our new location, I had this nightmare that everyone was going to walk in and go, "Oh yeah, but the old one was much nicer." So I needed to make sure that the new one, matched what we had done in the old one and even be more. So that's what we did. But if you go into our Coconut Grove store, it's different, and our mall store is different. The one we had on Miami Beach was different. So it's not so much um, that it has to be an ornate ambiance. In fact, some of the stores with the most ornate ambiance, I'm not as attracted to. But it just has to be a store that works within the context of whatever voice the owner is trying to give to their store. To me, there's a four-legged stool that makes a bookstore work and that a bookstore needs to keep kind of pursuing. One is certainly ambiance, but then you have selection. The next leg of the stool is selection. You have to have a selection to make people want to come. For me, what always goes in the back of my mind is what's going to make people pass up the five Barnes and Nobles between us and the most affluent part of Miami, or even another part of Miami. It doesn't have to be affluent, but wherever you go, you're passing all these chain stores. What's going to make someone come? So, ambiance, selection, obviously staff. Your staff needs to be really, you have to work on getting that staff so there is that conviviality and that feeling of being home and feeling, included. And the last one is community, is developing a sense of community. And, we do that in our main store through having a cafe. We have a full-blown restaurant cafe in our main store, and that helps. All of our events help. What we do in the community helps. Taking authors into various places helps. So I hope that answers you, Steve. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
no, it's a fabulous answer.
Let's
Lisa?
let's 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 talk a little bit about those legs. Talk about staff, and you're now managing a much larger enterprise, and as well as, some nationally important things in the book world. How do you cultivate and align staff, or make sure that the staff is aligned with what you're thinking and what you're hoping is created, or is that something that happens collectively?
You hope that it happens collectively. You hope that you're hiring the right people where you don't have to say anything to them. But it doesn't always work out that way, from what I just figured out. I mean, I'm completely unschooled I never learned management. I never learned any of that sort of stuff. And in the early days, I did everything. I mean, I was the guy behind the counter. I did that for 15 years, where I was always the guy that was ordering, selling, directing staff, all of that. But it's impossible to be every place at once. So what you hope to do is in the hiring process, hire like-minded folks and then delegate to managers, and I don't call them managers, but they're key people, a leadership team that can, that can take the values that have been developed in the store and move them forward. I mean, and it's imperfect, I mean, that's why a bookseller's job is never done. Always working, always, is this person being used in the best place possible? Is that person being used? We ask a lot of our staff. Our store still is not big. It's about 4,000 square feet under air in our Coral Gables store. So when we do events, we have to move all the bookcases aside, and there's a constant flow of doing stuff, and that's trying on the staff. And but I'm very proud of the fact that, our events coordinator has been with me for over 25 years, almost 30 years. One
Wow.
of his people is that long. I mean, my business manager has been with us for well over 25 years. So, I mean, we've tried to keep staff, together. But, things come up. I mean, I'll be very honest. I mean, just yesterday, I had to fire, a 20-year staff member who was doing, things that were untoward. He was, it was one of those bad situations
Mm.
where he didn't think, he's in his 60s and he was making unfortunate comments to one of our servers in their 20s. And that was a frightening, horrible, scary thing to have to do. Um, Anyway, I think I learned how to delegate. I think if you ask me when I really get down to it, I've learned how to delegate. And anybody who wants to grow has to learn how to delegate.
So tell us how to delegate. How does that work? What is I'm going to work for you. So um, what kinds of things are you going to delegate for me? Imagine that I'm going to work for you, and you're going to want me to share some values, and probably, and I'm wondering what those values are, and then what kinds of things, how are you, what kinds of things get delegated? What does that look like?
Well, I always did all the buying, and in the last 8 or 9 years, I have a buyer, a head buyer now, and that was very hard for me. And I had to make sure, she worked closely with me. I had to make sure that I trusted her sensibility of being a really great reader. And Gael is amazing. She's really, really great. And so what I try to do is hire people, and then I give them a long rope in a sense, not to hang themselves, but I don't try to micromanage them at first and allow them, just to see how much, or to see how much I can trust them. Or I start them as a bookseller and see what they're, how motivated they are. It's really getting to know different people. I'm very slow to move, which is one of my failings. And that's what my people will, the people who work with me will tell me, particularly my son, who is now working with me. He goes, "Hey, something's got to happen. You're doing this too slowly." But, so it's really about trusting people and and not coming down really hard on them if they make a mistake. Letting them
Yeah.
learn. You can never learn, the whole notion of risking and making mistakes. That's how you learn. And if people make too many mistakes, you just move them into another position, or you've made a bad choice, or that sort of thing. So I delegate that. I delegate lots of my bill paying. I mean, Linda is now, an expert in dealing with publishers and navigating that. Let me, sorry.
A
Hey,
little
Mitchell,
bit.
can I ask a
Having
couple
a little.
questions about numbers? Like how many employees do you have between all your stores and the restaurant and
It's
everything?
funny. We have 85 employees. Uh,
Whoa.
but again, a lot of them, we have a lot in the cafe, a lot in the main store. Now, they're not all full-time. I think we figured out it's about 50 FTEs, maybe. Uh,
And do you find that dealing with restaurant help is different than dealing with bookstore help?
Yeah, absolutely. It was initially, but we're trying to integrate that more. So the booksellers, you know, there's this amazing person that we have working for me, Gabriel, and Gabriel was a bookseller, an amazing bookseller. He'd been here from Cuba for 2 years. He was a journalist in Cuba, one of the most well-read people that I know. But he was coming here, and he was working on the bookstore side, and then he decided that he wanted to work in the cafe. He really loved food and beverage. So he's become a manager in the cafe. And so it brings the bookstore part of it. So we're trying to integrate cafe and bookstore wherever we can.
Yeah. We've had a couple people on. In fact, we have two of our former guests on, Cal Crosby and DJ Johnson. We've had a couple who you probably know. We've had a couple people on who've said that it's really harder to keep people on in the restaurant or cafe or coffee business than it is in the bookstore business.
Yeah, I guess Cal and DJ may agree with me that one of the reasons for that is, they're not used to making the wage that you make in the bookstore business. They work on tips and that sort of thing. And really it was very difficult until our cafe became much more successful. And I really credit my son Jonah with doing that. And so now the people working in the cafe are making they're making decent wages right now, really
Mm.
good wages with the tips that they're getting. And that's made all the difference. So, we have allowed, we have now servers who've been with us forever, and that sort of thing.
It's interesting because Cal, by the way, says he 100% agrees with what you've said about cafe help. Um, here's a question from Sarah from Prince Books. Um, do you pay the outside venues at all when you partner with them?
No, that's been something we've done from the beginning. We don't, because we believe we're bringing these venues something that they wouldn't normally be able to have. Even the Performing Arts Center. If the Performing Arts Center had to pay for some of these people that we're bringing, under a different rubric, they would be paying a fortune. So the synagogues, the churches, we work with the colleges. Like we've got Sonia Sotomayor coming, and we're doing it at University of Miami in their law school, big Donna Shalala Center. And for them, for them to have a Donna Shalala there, they would have to pay a lot of money, which she probably wouldn't take, so they would have a hard time getting her. So, that's always been what we started from the beginning. When we work with the Performing Arts Center, there is a ticket. The ticket is the price of the book. And then the Performing Arts Center adds $10 or $15 to cover some of their expenses. Most of the time, the expenses are picked up by the venues that we have.
Interesting.
Lovely. You know, you talked about values, and I'd love for you to unpack those values. Do you have one of the things that I know about you is you're one of the most loving people, warm people I've ever met, and you are exceedingly warm and loving to everybody that you meet. And I think every person that knows you would have that. That does that translate as a value that's shared? Are the rest of your staff like that too? Or are there other values that come into play?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, if you recorded this, can I play that for my kids and
Mitchell, I couldn't get off the phone with you because I kept wanting to talk to you. You're like,
Right.
you could just charge for conversations.
But I tell you, I really believe in the idea that I don't care, I don't care what you know in terms of books or whatever. If you play well with others and you're really good at that, I can train and teach you. If you're a reader and you with others, I can teach you everything else. Playing well with others is, look, why else are we in this business, right? None of us want to be in this business for a constant state of conflict. And, we have enough conflict dealing on the business side of things. So I don't want conflict in the space that we have. So I try to do that as best we can. Uh, and and support our staff that way. as best we can. I could tell stories, but my business person, Linda, has said to me, and this is when she started. She said, I had to make peace with the fact that I came from a little bit more of a corporate world. When I came to work with you, your world is a little more gray. You know, if someone's out sick because they had a heart problem, I may not be sticking completely to the PTO plan that we have, maybe giving them a little bit more. So, trying to be a little bit more humanistic in the way we approach things in the store from a personal point of view as well. There have
Yeah.
been a lot
And
of
that's
changes. There have been a huge amount of changes. I mean, this whole idea, which is really a good change, and it's among young people. We have so many young people working for us now, but the whole idea of, personal space, respecting them, things that would not have upset some of my staff back in the 80s or 90s, triggers a bunch of my staff today. So I have to really sort of change my sensibility and learn about, what's triggering them, and that people my age maybe shouldn't be doing certain things they're doing, and having to have hard conversations with old staff. So the integration of young staff, older staff, has been not a challenge, but it's been something new that I am noticing. And that's over the last 5, 10 years, that sort of thing.
yeah.
Jamie has a question. Lisa, should we have Jamie? Do you mind unmuting yourself if you're on mute and asking your question? It was a great question, but a long one. I could try.
Yes. Hi, Mitchell.
Hi, Jamie.
Um, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak. But um, perhaps you're kind of segueing from having younger folks and different sentimentalities, I guess, in the store. We have I'm talking about censorship and what special orders to take. We don't stock some books. We don't special order some books. Some books we special order because we don't want to stock it, but we don't think it's a problem to source it. And we have a store policy, and we're struggling with how to make frontline booksellers feel confident in their decisions. And what it kind of comes down to, aside from anything that might be triggering to an individual, is some folks might they apply their personal values to a book versus the store values, which is broader and more open. And I don't know if you've figured that out or if it's even an issue for you all, but
No, it's an issue all across the board, but I think people who come to work for us understand I have a very strict constructionist view of the First Amendment, and it's really strict. I'm on the board of NCAC, and I really believe that the way a store like ours and all of our indie stores build up credibility is not to restrict or not to cancel any book that is coming. Will
right.
I order the book in? Maybe not. But, will I stack it up if I get one copy? Maybe not. But I I think it's held us in a place like Miami in really good stead that we could present, people defend us because they know that we'll present people from differing points of view. And that I think is extremely important. I've had discussions with younger booksellers, whether it's at the ABA or wherever, and a lot of them are, as you say, extremely adamant about not carrying books that trigger them and that sort of thing. And my argument to them is unless you're steadfast about free expression, and unless
Mm,
you're steadfast, the people they're trying to come after are you. They're trying to come after the very people who are being triggered by these. That's who you're putting in danger. you're putting in danger yourself. And you can see what's happening in Florida, right? I mean, in Florida right now, what they're going after is anything, dealing with books that have anything to do with color, that have anything to do with Black history, have anything to do with, quote, DEI, whatever that means. Uh, it's really, really kind of an existential decision that has to come from the bookstore itself. And I think I was talking to you yesterday, Steve, that starting in 1982, the whole idea of freedom of speech and First Amendment stuff is part of my DNA, right? I mean, I can remember I was too young and I was just a kid, but when I was a kid in high school, I started an underground newspaper with the idea, and I remember the principal calling me in and getting really pissed off at me and trying to shut me down, not just me, but a whole group. And I said, look, this freedom of speech, we're able to do this stuff. There was the free speech movement in Berkeley. I mean, here's Jamie, here's a really interesting conversation I had and I probably set them up in a way they weren't happy about. But so we were having this whole discussion about J.K. Rowling and
Mm,
this, that, and, all this stuff. And I said, look, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. The hypothetical is this. What if there's a book that's being published that the entire Muslim community is opposed to because they feel like it's a slander against Muhammad? What if that book is published and that's happening, and but yet the author is being threatened, and would you carry that book? And most of them said no, they wouldn't carry it if it offended a certain group. And I said that did happen, satanic verses. And there were booksellers all across the country who felt they were doing the absolute right thing by putting it in the window because they were being threatened for carrying things that quote offended somebody. And it's not, will I go out and be provocative? No. I mean, it's funny. At one point, I was having a discussion with somebody. I get all the alerts when a book is ordered through our website, and I was talking to someone from the NCAC, and as I was talking to them about all this, coming through was an order for the Elders of Zion, that great anti-Semitic book by, and it was like, will you, it was like an existential question. Will I fulfill that order?
yeah.
And unfortunately, no distributor had it. And I basically, on an order like that, what I do where I don't want to give money to a
Hmm.
racist
Hmm.
organization like that, I gave the customer the address where they could get it themselves. Um, but that's an extreme. Am I answering you, Jamie, at all? I mean, I know it's hard, but
Um, yeah, it is hard. I am in lockstep with you about the store's policy, but it's it's having frontline booksellers in the moment when they're asked about a book. And sometimes you do need to do research to see if it's a responsible publisher or author, that type of thing. In the moment, giving the booksellers an understanding of, what we will and will not fulfill. And we will fulfill most anything that, making a bomb, no, Mein Kampf,
yeah.
no. But I just have some people who,
See, we sell Mein Kampf in a real Jewish
yeah,
area. I mean,
yeah,
I mean, it's, I just think you're putting a pressure, you really begin to put a pressure
mm,
when you're trading in that, unless you're a real specialty bookstore, if you're in a sense doing what the teachers of Miami-Dade public schools have to do. They're analyzing every book to
yeah,
see if it's going to offend a parent in some way or whatever. And that's going down a slippery slope, I think. So my booksellers, they don't, you know, I've never had one of them come up to me and go, someone just asked me for this book. What do I do with it? Um, So I think they understand from the beginning kind of where we are, you know,
Yeah,
in that sense.
that's
Yeah.
helpful. This all started with a Project 2025 self-published public domain information, book collected and printed at Ingram. So okay, this that's helpful. It's actually me, not them.
Mitchell, I know that part of the way you built your business was with incredible authors like Salman Rushdie and who you've had, Joan Didion, etc. Um, do you approach authors the same way? Will you let anybody who's got a book out that people are interested in speak?
Uh, no, not, and I'm not canceling them. It's a matter of what I consider to be legitimate conversation. And it could be someone really from the right, but if it's a legitimate kind of conversation, I have Roger Stone, for instance, who lives right up the street from us. Not literally up the street, but just a couple. I mean, I don't need a circus. I'm not looking for that, but will I have, I have huge amounts of, I've had Born come. I've had, when I have, what's her name, who's now the Supreme Court Justice, who's got a new book out. Yeah, I'd have her come, and I'd have her come and speak. I mean, I don't, but if you look at who we have mostly, it's probably more a little bit clearly, anyone who knows the bookstore, it's more on a progressive side. I have a table that I've been running now. I thought I was going to take it down, but it's a table called What's Going On, the Marvin Gaye quote. And it changes, but it's primarily real progressive attacks on what's happening now. It's a big table and it's become the most popular table we have. And 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 we have a lot of conservative people coming into the store, and uh it's hard. I mean, we don't have that. We're not a political bookstore, but we do engender lots of conversation.
Well, and speaking of that conversation, you have a podcast, and I'm curious, from a practical standpoint, are you monetizing that podcast? Does it feed the store in some way, or how are you strategically using those
I
conversations?
had the podcast for 4 years, and it's now on hiatus, actually.
Okay,
And
okay,
I didn't really monetize it. It was early. I mean, it was pre-pandemic. We did this podcast. It was very cool. You can still hear a lot of it, but
I just listened to a
it
lot of it.
became a lot of work, where we did it every week. It was a weekly podcast. And it just got to be, for me, a little too much. I know that DJ who's on the call, and I just watched a bunch of his YouTube programs. And there's a lot of stores that are using YouTube and trying to monetize that, which I think is brilliant. And that's something I can see us doing, down the road is doing some stuff like that.
Yeah, by the way, if anybody's interested in the interview with DJ Johnson of Baldwin and Company in New Orleans, which is really fantastic too, as well as Mitchell's interview now, it's on the YouTube channel that we have. We have a StoryBrand YouTube channel, and just send me a note if you can't find it.
Yeah, well, I just asked DJ in the chat to give us all the link because that's a good thing. I wanted to return, Mitchell, to you used the phrase when you were talking about your stores. You said, and that's where the revolution will begin. Um, what did you mean by that?
I
And
meant
tell us about that.
there's so much. It's where the wealth disparity is so great. I
Okay.
mean, you walk into the Bell Harbor shops and you go, my God,
Yeah.
nobody should be able to spend, $750,000 on a handbag or whatever, that sort of thing. It's just
Yeah.
sort of a joke now.
Colored credit cards and all of those things.
I used to say that I wanted a cafe so we could plot the revolution the way they did. Um,
It would be and
these
and
days, these days, revolution is a lot on my mind, given
in your mind.
what's
Well,
happening.
part of the revolution that you're making is through the Literary Foundation. And can you describe a little bit the structure of your relationship as a with a fiscal sponsor and all of that? Kind of
Yeah, we
unpack
have a fiscal sponsor, It's the Coral Gables Community Foundation, and our fiscal sponsor has been really great. They know the store, they're friends of the store, so it's been a really easy relationship to work with. Um, and we're part of the Emerson Collective bookstore cohort, and we're raising money. I have one dedicated person who works part-time with me, and then we utilize people in the store who help facilitate the foundation as well. We keep the foundation separate from the bookstore right now. I know that Amanda, with Kepler's, they're morphing into one where the bookstore is a not-for-profit as well. But we have it two separate things, and we lend bookstore staff to the foundation and vice versa. And we do a lot of events that are foundation events in the bookstore as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things Amanda could even talk about, but knowing a lot about Kepler's and Praveen and Amanda and what they're doing, Mitchell, do you do some of the things they do, which is have the foundation take over some of the responsibilities to become, quote, more profitable? Do you have
That's
membership
the
program?
that's the goal. That's the goal is to, have, some of our event coordinator being paid for by the foundation, having the foundation be remunerated for when we close down a room for an author event, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I mean, we're looking toward that. We haven't gotten there yet completely, to be honest. Right now, most of the money that we're spending has to do with books and getting the authors down and putting them into schools and that sort of stuff. That's primarily what we're doing. Uh, but I hope to move it into the next phase
Yeah, a
where
lot of what uh, Kepler's is doing is driving profitability just to be businesslike for a minute, even though I share your anti-capitalist
no,
tendencies.
no, no, I'm not
I'm
anti-capitalist.
sorry, I'm joking. It was a joke. It was a joke.
But
We could
but
go to jail for
I
saying that.
believe in talking about business. I do not want to give the impression that you can do this on karma alone. You need to have a business head to be able to do any of this stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things they're doing is fascinating is they're actually becoming more profitable because they can not only lay off some of the expenses of the foundation, but the foundation has them, but the foundation can bring in money that normally a bookstore can't in terms of
Yeah,
donations and membership. Do you have a membership program?
we don't. We don't. But that could be something we'll look into. But those are what Kepler is doing. It's what Amanda's doing. I mean, that's a model for a lot of folks. And there are people on this call that are probably doing it that way as well. And we do want to get to a place where we can lay off some of our expenses. The old, remember, I don't know, those of you who've been involved with the ABA, remember that there'd be the 2% solution. If you remember that there'd be all these things because we discovered that the average bookstore profit was minus 2%. It was how to create 2% solution so you can break even. And this is one of those ways.
Well,
And
and
let the community own.
Well, you're frozen
What's
for,
that?
you got a little frozen, but are
Did
you
I
still frozen on that?
freeze? I'm
You are.
sorry.
Well, I'm really
I was
loving
going to
your
say,
comment that there we go. Go ahead.
am I still frozen?
yeah, you're
No,
fine,
you're good.
I can,
You're good.
uh,
sort of.
I forgot what I was
It's
going to
in and
say.
out.
My frozen me was going to say something and I forgot what it was.
Well, you made this wonderful
Hello? Are
quote
you?
that I'm gonna. Can you hear her? You quoted this
Yeah.
wonderful thing to put on a pillow that you cannot make a bookstore by karma alone, um, and that you've got to have a business head for this. And you said earlier that a third to a half of your books are arts and related, and that you have a big stock, and that's a big investment. And I know I've heard you speak in the past about the frustration of those require longer to sell and you're sending them back and you're getting them. Can you talk a little bit about that from a business perspective?
Yeah. I, all right. Just the history of that is I think I've always been involved. I've always been interested in arts, but not really a student of arts. But early on, when we opened our very first University of Miami, architecture was beginning to sort of rise and make a name for itself. And architects had a hard time, finding work of other architects. The only way back then it was either through magazines or books. So I started carrying big, big, big amounts of art books, the entire Rizzoli collection, things I would get from abroad, from Belgium. If a new Leon Creer came out, we might sell 100 of them at that time at $50 each, which was huge for a little 500 square foot bookstore. Um, and so that just carried on, and we built up this market. I argue with a lot of booksellers that they are maybe missing out by not trying to cater to an art book crowd and interior design, art design, because you never know who's in your neighborhood, and they don't have easy access, and people don't want to buy those books online. They want to touch them and feel them. Uh, and it really it morphed into after years. The idea of urns and flipping books back and forth has always been most a part of this business for me. And there is a model in Argentina, Europe, that is uh, scan and pay model. In other words, what happens is after the publisher really owns the book until you sell it, kind of a consignment model, basically. And I have effectuated consignments with a number of publishers so that I don't really have to pay for it until I've sold it. It allows me to carry a large inventory without having to play the credit game of in and out, returning, not returning, all of that.
Wonderful.
So I have a nose like that.
Do you do that with independent publishers or with some of the big ones? I mean, that consignment arrangement. Um,
Well, I have some with independent publishers. I have some with big publishers.
okay.
It all depends. And I do it, you know, just to do it. So the publisher, like I have a relationship with Fiden, and the Fiden rep comes. We talk about which books will work for us, and they're all on consignment in terms of that. I do it with
Love that.
DAP. I've done it, I do it. Yeah, I do it with a lot of different kinds of publishers. So it's uh it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, that is
And
that
listen,
is
I
something
see
that
Cal's comment to Jamie. I don't want to shame anybody to not carrying certain that they need to carry everything. Every bookstore can make their choices, and I respect it completely and understand why other bookstores wouldn't. I was just trying to give you my sense of where we come from. That's all. And
One of the things, Mitch, that I was impressed about when you talk, you built your store on the curation of the store and the books. It wasn't about politics, it was about the quality of the literary quality.
yeah,
And you, as a English major and a major reader, and with your own podcasts and such, on books, somehow that translates for people. It's a little different than some of the stuff we've pushed that are more direct marketing, but that's a fascinating marketing approach, which is via the books.
yeah.
yeah.
The books
We're just go ahead, sorry.
the books are decoration.
Yeah.
We are just a few minutes away from the end. I'm wanting to ask you, Mitch, what today is the gift of this moment and being a bookseller in this moment? What is the gift that you find in this moment for
That
yourself?
did You're frozen a little bit. Can you repeat the question for me, Seth?
Um, what is in today's moment? What is the gift that you would say you are receiving, participating in this way, in the way that you are in in the world of bookselling, in the world of books. What is today's gift for you?
I am the luckiest guy in the world because I'm in a community of all of you, the people on this call. I mean, when I think of the world of bookselling and I think of people who are in bookselling, it's the most amazing group of people that I've ever come into contact with. And I think if I hadn't joined this world, who knows, where I'd be, who knows? But I can go to any city that has an independent bookstore and I can feel welcome. And not only just welcome, but they're a friend of mine. And we can sit down, we can break bread. The amount of passion that is in this industry is not to be believed. I mean, when you really think about which independent stores over the course of the last 40 years are still around, ask yourself. Independent bookstores have done something that is miraculous to still be here in this digital world that we're in with all of the incredible pressures dealing with book banning, pressure in the industry, pressures from the internet, all of the competition that's there. I mean, if you don't have passion, you're not doing it. Anyone in this industry who's here having a passion that just feeds my soul. So that's the gift of all of you guys.
Wow. Thank you, Mitch. What a great closing. Right, Lisa?
Well, this is a remarkable, Lisa. You're doing an amazing thing, you and Steve, and uh, I hope to get more involved in listening and hearing about all this stuff. So thanks.
It is so interesting. We could go for many more hours, but we appreciate in your busy schedule you taking the time to share your love of bookselling and your love of this community. Thank you
No,
so much.
thank
And Cal and DJ, thanks for attending. It's great to have more bookstore owners on the bid on.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. I look forward to coming to your stores into Miami.